All right, so thank you, Dr. Paris, for meeting today so that I could ask you some of these questions. So I know that you've worked with some plant genetics before and stuff. Could you describe some of the work that you've done with regards to that?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, I was working with soybean and developing new varieties for farmers to grow. And so that included things like Roundup resistance.
Okay.
And so in that sense, I was working with genetically modified crops.
Okay, cool. So I have a few students who have some questions about GMOs that we thought we'd love to ask you and stuff. So Autumn asks, how dangerous could GMOs be to people?
Well, that's a good question, Autumn, because one of the things we like to know about our food is it safe to eat? And so all the GMOs that are developed currently go through a pretty rigorous testing process and are regulated by the USDA, and so they're as safe as we can make them right now. And what I mean by that is you never know long term what the effect of a certain organism might be on your food supply. So we know in the short term we've done feeding studies with animals and have found that there's no observable effect right now. We have to be careful though to say that there's no effect, because we can't really guarantee that totally, but we feel like as a scientific community that GMOs right now are safe to eat, and of course we're still doing further testing to sort of show that that's true over time as well. So maybe 20, 40, 50 years down the road, we still want to know, are they safe to eat?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're continuing to monitor.
It's definitely a bigger question that takes a long time to answer.
It does.
It's not something we can just give a short, simple answer to right now. So
yeah, and there's lots of scientific breakthroughs that have kind of gone through that process. Lots of them have been safe, like vaccines for illness, but some of them occasionally are not helpful to the environment, or and we're thinking about things like DDT, and so it's something that you want to monitor over time for sure.
Yep, definitely. Sounds good. So Kirsten is asking, what is the difference between when we talk about organic and when we talk about genetically modified?
Okay, well that's a good question, Kirsten. Organic kind of refers to the environment in which an organism is grown, and genetically modified is talking about the genes within the organism. So an example of a genetically modified crop would be like soybean or corn, where you insert a gene from a bacteria that gives it a particular trait that you want. So herbicide resistance or insect resistance. So that's genetically modifying the crop. Organic crops, by definition, they would typically not be genetically modified. And then the growth conditions that you put them under. So you would not use commercial fertilizer, you would not use synthetically manufactured pesticides. So pretty much it's like you go out in your backyard and you plant something and you don't give it any fertilizer or man-made chemicals, but you can use things like animal manure for fertilizer or compost, and there are a limited number of compounds that you could apply to deter pests, like maybe a red pepper spray or something that is natural.
Using something else that's organic.
Right.
To fight it off.
And then if you're, so that's an organic plant, and if you're talking about like organic chickens, then you would have to feed them all organic feed.
Okay, got it.
To call them organic. So the further you go up the food chain, the more inputs you have that are all organic.
Okay, got it. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. So Janice is asking, she says, why are candies like M&Ms genetically modified?
Janice, good. Yeah, so maybe Mr. Elkins could bring you some M&Ms and you could test this out, but probably you're not gonna notice the difference in taste between non-GMO and GMO candies, for example. And the reason is today, well, I should back up. In the past, we used sugar cane as our source of sugar. So table sugar comes from sugar cane, and you grow that and process it. Well, as it turns out, sugar beet, which is related to the beet, it also collects lots of sugar that we can very easily extract for table sugar. And so now most of our sugar that we get is from sugar beet.
Okay.
And as it turns out, most of the sugar beets have been genetically modified for different traits, like maybe insect resistance or something like that. And so all of the sugar now in our system, in our manufacturing system, is genetically modified technically because it comes from sugar beet, which is a GMO crop.
Yeah.
So if a company, for example, wants to produce a candy that's GMO free, they would have to use all GMO free ingredients, including sugar, which then they would have to go back to something like sugar cane and use that source of sugar as their GMO-free sugar.
Okay, and so that GMO-free candy might take a longer process to make because they have to get it from sugar cane, or is that sugar cane and sugar beet kind of?
Once they kind of get that in the system, the time would be similar.
Okay.
There may be a difference in cost though, because sugar beets are a little more efficient to grow, and so the cost is lower per pound of sugar.
So using the GMO source is actually reducing the cost to make it. And is that going to reduce the cost that it takes to buy the candy?
Theoretically, that would be passed on to the consumer. So
theoretically,
yes. So most GMO crops tend to be very cost-effective, lower cost to produce and lower cost to purchase.
Okay, got it. Yep. Very interesting. All right, so second to last here, Camille is asking what kind of chemicals are in corn and soybeans around here in our community?
Okay. Well, we have basically two types of GMO crops. Ones that have a gene for resistance to herbicide, that is, you can spray them with a chemical and it kills all the weeds in the field, but it leaves the crop growing healthily, and that's kind of what you want. You don't want to kill your crop, of course. And the other is a gene that gives the plant resistance to insects. So the insect will eat the plant and then die. In the past, we've done that by spraying all the fields with what we call insecticide, and insecticide kills insects. It's pretty broad, so you can actually kill some insects that you may want not to be killed. Just because you sprayed your field and now you've treated the whole field and anything that comes in there dies.
Yeah.
So with a GMO insecticide, you can put that gene in the plant, so say a corn plant, and we often call it Bt resistance because of the source of resistance from a bacteria. And so when the insect comes into the field, it's okay, but when it starts to eat the corn plant, that's when it ingests that piece of DNA that's produced by the bacteria naturally, and we've put that into the corn, so it now produces that.
Yeah.
And basically it stops the insect from being able to feed, and so then the insect dies. So it's another cost-effective way because you don't have to go in and apply, or you don't have to purchase the chemical, and it's helpful to the environment because you don't have any runoff, or you're not killing insects that don't directly feed on your crop. So.
Okay, got it. So the gene is inside of the plant, and then that's producing a toxin that's killing the insects.
Correct.
Okay.
So in terms of engineering, we've engineered the plant now to produce the same protein that the bacteria produced.
Okay.
And so it kills the insect.
And is that protein dangerous to humans at all?
That's the good question. So are GMOs dangerous? And this particular chemical works with insect digestive systems, and they're kind of the opposite of us. So we have a really high acidic content in our stomachs, and with insects, it's a basic. So they're a very basic system in terms of pH.
Yeah.
And so, right, the opposite of acid, and so they work in that way. And we've done a lot of testing because that's a good question we all want to know.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of testing, fed a lot of animals these products, and have seen no ill effects to this point. And again, we have to kind of put that caveat in there, to this point.
Yeah.
But it's been 25 years, and so we're starting to feel pretty confident that what we're seeing is a long-term trend.
Good, very cool. Well, I have one last question, and it's from Keegan. He's asking, is it possible to accidentally mess up a crop through genetic engineering?
Okay, well, it's sort of like homework. There's a lot of ways to mess up your assignment, Keegan. Probably the biggest thing that we see with that is initially. So in the research phase, you can insert the gene in the wrong place in the plant, and really it doesn't make it a monster plant per se. It just causes the plant to not be able to function correctly, and typically they'll die. So if you have a gene and you stick it in the middle of another important gene, then the gene that you've disrupted ceases to function and the plant typically dies.
Yeah.
So in that way you can mess up a crop, but that's usually in the very early testing phase, and it's not that it would be harmful to eat. It's just that the plant can't grow, and so nobody's going to plant anything that doesn't grow, because then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So
yes.
In terms of long term, though, that's kind of what we're keeping our eye on, making sure that some of the genetic modifications that we've put in place don't, in fact, cause harm to the plant or to people or animals that are eating the plant. So remember, it's not just people that are eating the plants. With our soybeans in particular, it's largely animal feed, and so lots of animals are being fed soybean meal and corn as well. And so we're also interested and concerned with how do these GMOs affect the animals. And so we've got quite a large data set now, and we'll keep monitoring that as we go ahead. But so far we've seen no indication that it's any different at all from a non-GMO plant.
Okay, got it. So this isn't just humans we're concerned about, we're also concerned about livestock, other animals that might be eating these crops and that kind of thing. But that's why we're doing extensive testing to make sure that we're getting out there the safe crops that both animals and humans can consume.
And it's not just plants that are grown in the field. We're also concerned with, is this gene able to move out of the field into, say, a weed or another host plant? And so we're very aware of that and kind of keep track of, do we see this gene popping up in other plants?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, well, herbicide-resistant weeds are another topic, but that it's not the fact that the gene itself is moving out into the weeds, it's that we're selecting weeds that are resistant to the herbicide just through constant pressure.
Okay.
So that's kind of a different topic. The gene itself, though, is not moving into those weeds. It's the fact that we've applied Roundup, for example, so much that we're selecting resistant weeds in the population.
Okay, got it. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Paris, for being here and for answering these students' questions. Really appreciate it. I know they will as well. So, thank you so much.
All right.